yeah, let's talk about the game a little more. Oh, I don't want to continue. Actually, no, we'll continue and see what's up.
This is rather gloomy.
Why don't you lighten the mood for us while we're here then?
I'll see what I can do.
Awesome. Okay, I'm gonna leave the game like this. I'm gonna pause it because they're gonna talk. Let me just talk about the game a little more. I'm almost done. I'm gonna talk about Xion, talk about Alphen, talk about the plot, and talk about the shortcomings. I'm not gonna go too much into it because the playthrough's not done. But Xion, I didn't like Xion at first. I didn't dislike her, but she was easily the weakest for a while. Like, I definitely think Xion's development, I think they made her unlikable on purpose. They did this, if you play Tales of the Abyss, anyone watching on YouTube, Tales of the Abyss is known for having the best protagonist in the game. They do really well with, I'm not going to go too much into it, but Tales of the Abyss does really well with developing Luke as a character. I feel like with Xion, they did similar to that. They made her unlikable intentionally, and then they just wanted to make her, like, likable. Like, she started off as someone who did not care what happened to the world. She was from Rena, wanted to stop the Lords to get rid of her thorns. She started off as really selfish. She was helping Alphen, like, the game started off with a camaraderie going on. Like, Alphen and Xion were not friends. They had their differences way early in the game. And all of them were just working towards their own selfish goals, especially Xion. She was literally just using Alphen for the blazing sword. But, as the game went on, you could see she started to develop feelings for Alphen, and she started to get, really care. I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff. They did really well with Xion. I think they made her unlikable on purpose. That's what I believe. I'm not sure if the actual developers did that, but that's what I believe, and I'm going to stick with it. They did so well with Xion, and then as the game went on, you see, like, she opens her eyes, and she starts to, like, feel for the Dahnans, and she starts to, like, want to live. Because remember, at the end of the game, we found out that Xion was planning to die and kill herself to save the world. Kind of like Colette in Symphonia and Yuna in Final Fantasy X. So we find that out, and, like, again, she later learns as she develops a friendship with Rimwell, Kisara, Dohalim, and Law, and Alphen, of course, she starts to think, like, yeah, I want to live, I don't want to die. So that was really well done. I love that scene before you depart Lenegis, where she's, like, crying to Alphen that she wants to live and not die. It's very human for her. Like, she really just starts off as someone unlikable. I feel like they did that intentionally, and she just becomes very human. Dude, they did so well with Xion, which is why I really would have been upset if they killed her off. I'm glad they didn't, though. And yeah, her relationship with Alphen, albeit it's a little standard. If you play Tales of games, it's nothing new. It's very similar to other protagonists in Tales of games. It's well done. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Something can be basic and still be good. Alphen and Xion's relationship is great. But yeah, basically my praise to Xion is how they developed her. So I don't consider myself not liking her in the beginning a bad thing, because again, they did similar to what they did with Luke. They made her unlikable, and then they easily, like, developed her really well. And her obsession with food is hilarious. And before we talk about Alphen, I want to say skits were great. Skits were phenomenal. Great way to banter the characters. Tales of is known for having good skits, but I just wanted to point out the skits were amazing and the interactions were amazing. These characters just go great together. I don't know what happened there. I hope my video didn't cancel out. But, characters are phenomenal. They go well together. Finally, Alphen. Alphen's great. I don't think Alphen's the best character. I don't think he's the weakest character. I think Alphen's probably the middle for me. There's definitely a lot of mixed stuff I have to say about Alphen. I know Raptor's saying that, Raptor said something in chat that his personality's boring, but his backstory's interesting. I agree with the first point. I disagree, kind of, with the second point. Actually, let me put it like this. If we were talking about, like, the beginning of the game, like, the first half, I would agree with Raptor's point. However, later in the game, I disagree. I can kind of see where you're coming from. I can see where anyone's coming from. Alphen does seem, in the beginning of the game, Alphen comes off as just generic protagonist, wants to do good for the world. I would agree with that. Like, I can kind of see where people are coming from, but however, play the whole game and I think you're wrong. If you're just basing off, like, the first, like, 10 to 20 hours, then yeah, I would agree with you. But I disagree if you're beating the game and still think that. If you're playing the game and actually finish the game and you still think that, I disagree. I think Alphen's backstory is interesting, how he, like, you know, how he was forced to help the help the Renans, like, do the Sovereign. The whole Sovereign stuff, I have problems with that. I'll get into it in a bit. But, Alphen's just a great character. Alphen just, like, I think Alphen, like, is really realistic and relatable because like he was a slave, and yeah, like you it's a really simple motivation to want to like liberate the world and like want to make a change, but Alphen like was a slave. Like I don't blame him. Like imagine being a slave and just like being forced to do these things and wanting to make a change. Like Alphen's just like part of the resistance, and he just wants to like do all he can. Like it's simplistic, but like Alphen went through a lot. Like I think it's totally understandable, and I can kind of see how Alphen's personality is simplistic, but I think where Alphen shines, Alphen is kind of like, how do I put this into words that doesn't make it sound weird? Alphen is like the, I guess, ray of hope. I can't think of a better term for it. Alphen's like the motivator. I'll use that word. Alphen is like the motivator for every other character. I think Alphen does really well at like supporting the other characters, and again, he's not a bad or a good character. He's like in the middle probably for me. But I think without Alphen, things would just go not right. Like Alphen does so well at like encouraging the other characters, like Kisara and Law especially, and Shion especially. But Alphen just, I know Alphen may not seem like he has much of a personality. He seems like a blank slate sometimes, but I disagree. I think Alphen was really well done at like making the other characters shine, and I also think he's pretty interesting. Alphen could be kind of a cool dude and kind of hilarious. I like Alphen, but I can kind of see where people are coming from with that. But they do really well with Alphen's backstory, and they do well with like, you know, he's just feeling things. Like he went through a lot as a slave, and as like a slave on Lenegus, and as a slave on Pelaglia and all. Like I don't blame him for feeling this way. Like he's just, he may seem like a normal guy, but like he's a normal guy trying to make a change for good reason. Like he doesn't want anyone to go through what he went through. It could just be me, but I just really related to Alphen because like I like the struggles he went through and how he like rised up and how he just wanted to like save Shion. It was just well done. Again, he's not the best protagonist. Not the best protagonist by a mile. Mila Maxwell's a better protagonist. Velvet's a better protagonist. He's not even my favorite protagonist, but they did really well with Alphen. I was kind of like, before. I was like, yeah, Alphen's cool. In the beginning of the game, I was like, Alphen's cool. But then as the game went on, I'm just a sucker for Alphen. Like, he's probably one of my favorite protagonists. I wouldn't be surprised if someone's like, yeah, Alphen's boring. But, he's one of my favorite protagonists, and that's all I really have to say on him. Again, I'm gonna wait a bit until I sit on the game to go into more of the characters, but Alphen would probably be in the middle of the Tales of Arise rankings for me. He's just, like, really relatable, I feel, and just seeing him wanting to make a change based on what he's been through is really well done. I think they did good with him at the end. Yeah, but I don't want to go too much into that. Let's talk about the plot. I'll make this quick. The plot, very half and half on good and bad. The plot itself in the beginning of the game isn't necessarily good. The plot isn't really what I played the game for, but, the plot in the beginning is, like, relatively basic. However, the world building and lore they did in the beginning was phenomenal. Going to the 5 realms, seeing how the people and the citizens of, each realm are acting, and seeing how they're either suffering or, like, in Elden Menancia, they weren't really suffering. They were, like, Yohalim was trying to make a change. But, like, just seeing how they are in their realms was really interesting. Like, the plot itself wasn't interesting. I'll give you that. The plot could have been, like, more interesting. Berseria and Xillia have better plots. But, like, I lost my train of thought. Hold up, there's something in chat. No, Raptor, you're missing my point. I said people, I wouldn't agree with them. I would still disagree with them. I mean, to each their own. Like, I never said I agree with someone. Dude, what is going on with my capture card right now? Oh, it's my frames, they're dropping. But, no, I didn't say that at all. I said people, like, whatever, people say he's boring, I would agree with them. If they played the game, though, and said it, I disagree with them. Like, again, I can't change someone's opinion, but I would heavily disagree with them if they said it after finishing the game. There's 2 ways of looking at Alphen. There's one way, which is, like, playing the game the first time and just saying Alphen looks boring. But actually finishing the game changes my opinion of Alphen, and anyone who says otherwise, I disagree with them. So, I wouldn't understand them, but hey, you know, you have your opinion, Raptor, I can't change it. But yeah. Whatever, I'm done talking about Alphen. But, the story. The plot is really well done. The way it's executed is well done. The world building and lore is real. I loved it. The way they did in the 5 realms. The plot itself is basic, but the way they did the build up is well done. Second half of the game, this is gonna hurt. I definitely think the plot stays interesting, but I definitely think the second half is weaker. The second half was good. It wasn't bad. It was just fine, decent, good. I think the plot itself is interesting. I think the way, like, we find out that the plot twist is pretty interesting in concept. Like, Rena's not being real and, like, being created from Danons, that's wild. And the whole contest and stuff. Like, it's interesting. I just think the way it's executed is horrible. They just really, like, rush everything down your throat. Like, they just, like, oh, this happens. Like, oh, it's all, like, they have, like, these pieces, like, oh, like, we're finding out these things, like, the crown contest isn't real. Like, oh, what's Rena actually like? They just kind of tease you with all these plot points, and then literally in one, like, after the tormented limbs and red, and before the red woman boss, they just shove all of it down your throat. They don't give you enough time to process it, and they just rush it down your throat. Again, I think it could have been better. I don't think the plot itself is bad. Like, I think it's pretty interesting what they do with the second half, but how they execute it kind of ruins it. I can't really put it into words, but just play the game yourself and you'll see what I mean. Like, it's just like you're playing the game. I don't even care that it's back-to-back cutscenes. I know a lot of people care that it's like back-to-back cutscenes. I don't care about that. That's not what I'm complaining about. I'm just complaining about, like, the cutscenes just start to be like info dumps and, like, don't really do much for the characters. It's literally just one thing after another, and again, it could be well done, but Tales of Arise did not do it well. Like, it kind of ruined any sort of impact the second half had. It had a lot of potential, but, like, it just didn't live up to it. Like, I didn't care. Obviously, I cared, because the characters were here. The characters were the only reason I cared. But, like, I couldn't really, like, put myself in the game's world. I couldn't immerse myself because of how the second half executed. It was horrible, horribly rushed. And it's unfortunate. It was even more rushed than Zillia's last act. Zillia's last act was rushed, but it wasn't this bad. Zillia's third act was still really satisfying, even though it was rushed, but this game wasn't that satisfying. And this kind of goes into another problem I have, the villains. The lords seemed interesting, fighting each lord, kind of like Persona 5-esque, but the lords weren't that interesting. Every character outside the 6 characters weren't interesting. They didn't have any memorable characters outside of the 6. Like, outside of these 6 characters, they didn't spend enough time building anyone up. The villains were just, the lords were just like, oh, I'm evil, I'm taking over, and I'm trying to win the crown contest. You kill them, and that's it. That's all you get. Volrin was missed potential. They could have done more with Volrin. I think Volrin is heavily missed potential. They could have done much more with Volrin. But they didn't. Like, I thought it was wild when Volrin died. I was like, oh, Volrin died. Who's going to be the final villain now? But then they brought Volrin back, and he wasn't even the main villain. They literally just showed him, like, alive and, like, not really himself. And then at the final phase of the final boss, don't get me wrong, the final boss, the way the final phases worked was cool. But again, they really just picked Volrin, like, oh, right, it's kind of like the developers were like, oh yeah, Volrin's back alive, let's use him as the final phase because the Great Spirit shouldn't be the final phase. It's just really lame how they did that, honestly. Like, Volrin was missed potential. They could have done Volrin so much better. He had so much, like, build-up, but, you know, it's just... Again, the second half is just, like, a missed potential thing. Like, I think it could have been interesting, and the plot points are interesting, but the game does a horrible job of making me care and making me immersed in the world. So, like, I wasn't bored. I was still enjoying the game, but, like, it was just, you know... It could have been better. I'm heavily disappointed. It doesn't ruin the game for me. The game is still good, but, like... This stops it from being the perfect game. If you asked me, like, Nova, what's the biggest problem you have with this game? I would say the villains and the second half. The villains more. Like, Tales of has good villains. Tales of Zillia's Chimeriad are very good. Tales of Berseria's Abby is very good villains. And the Designs and the Angels of Crucius and Symphonia are good villains. This game's villains aren't that good. They kind of just come and go, and that's heavily disappointing. Volrin was the only one they could have gave actual, like, depth to, but they did not, and it disappoints me because Tales of doesn't always have the best villains. Grace Zev's villains aren't that great, but other Tales of games I played, like Zillia and Berseria and Symphonia, have great villains. Abyss even has great villains, but you know, it's just disappointing that the villains weren't that great. They had potential, but they just didn't live up to it. that's like all my problems. I want to read these comments, and then we're going to, I'm going to read these chat comments, and then I'm going to actually use the restroom after that, and then we'll get started with the post game. So, Raptor says, Elder Menancia was probably the high point for the story for me, and this is the best way for me to play it. So it counts not getting a PS4 just for this. Oh, yeah. If you watch the play... Yeah, Raptor, you don't seem like you like the game as much as me, so don't buy a PS4 for this. I agree. Elder Menancia was one of the high points for me. Probably the highest point for me. I agree. It was really well done. The second half, yeah, Raptor's not a fan of the second half. I'm gonna be honest. I don't hate the second half. It's just unfortunate how missed potential it was. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't even that good. It was okay. Yeah, they rushed the second half. Instead of giving little clues and letting them grow into something, they forced everything all at once. It would be fine if the scenes were spaced out, but they weren't. Yeah, Raptor, honestly, that's literally how I feel. That's literally what I explained. I explained how they just shove everything down your throat at the end. I heavily agree. They should have, like, let the plot points flourish from, like, the beginning. You know what I would have liked? I would have liked this. This is also my problem with the game. I'm going to talk about this really quickly. I'm sorry I'm ranting, but not really ranting. I'm talking about the game, but this game was great. I want to get my feelings out. But, they should have done this. Have the realms. After every realm, they should have had, like, the main villain. That's another thing. The main villain. The main villain. There was, like, really no main villain. Like, Volrin wasn't really the main villain. I thought Volrin would be the main villain, and if they did more with him, I would have been on board, but the main villain was first, like, oh, the Red Woman. There's no way she could be the main villain. It's literally the Great Spirit. Like, there's no person. There's no, like, actual depth to that. It's just like, oh, the Great Spirit wants to bring the worlds together for some reason. Like, it's just... Again, they didn't let the plot points flourish. What they should have done is this. After each realm, they should have had, like, every Tales of game has, like... Again, I'm comparing this a lot to Tales of games, but this is a Tales of game. It's the best way for me to review the game. Tales of Xillia gave you little scenes of the Chimeriad and what they're planning. That was well done. Plus, the Chimeriad had much more depth than any of the lords in this game. Tales of Berseria did this. Tales of Berseria had so much of the Abbey, like, behind the scenes, like, what they were planning, what they were doing. That was well done. This game did not do that. You got, like, no backstory. You got, like, no... Every time the lords were on screen, the characters were on screen. They should have put the villains, or the lords, like... They should have gave us more behind the scenes of not the 6 party members. It was always the 6 party members, and they're great. I love the 6 party members, but they should have gave us more scenes of other characters, like villains. And again, let the plot points flourish throughout the first realm. Again, the first part was well done. The realms were my favorite part of the game. But they should have added those little, like, hints, even if they were just a little hint of what was happening in part 2. Just little glimpses of it in part 1. That would have made the second half flow a lot better, I think. Like, have the little plot points in part 1 and show, like, maybe the lords or show Volrin, like, doing stuff. Or even if it's just, like, a vague talk, like, just show that something's happening behind the stuff with the realms. It's just, like, it just makes part 2 feel like it's shoving it down your throat and not giving you a chance to process it. It's really disappointing. Again, I don't want to hate on the game. The game is great. This doesn't ruin the game for me, but it stops the game from being my favorite Tales of game, and it stops the game from being perfect. Other than that, though, I'm enjoying Tales of Arise. Tales of Arise is still a good game. I still think the conclusion was great. It just really should have not been rushed. And it should have been... I think that's really what it comes down to. The game was rushed. Like, the second half was rushed. That's really what it comes down to. I think the conclusion was great. It wasn't amazing. It was good. Yeah, I hate it when endings are rushed, too. Vesperia... I love Tales of Vesperia, but Vesperia's ending is also rushed. But again, Vesperia's final act is much better than Tales of Arise's. This ending was insanely rushed. I think I'm done talking about the game, but 9 out of 10 game, 3rd favorite Tales of game in my top 10. This is probably my 9th or 10th favorite game. I would have to think about it, but this is my top 10 favorite game. Again, I don't think part 2 is bad. I think the conclusion was good. Just good, though. Like, I think the conclusion was fine or good. It wasn't great because of part 2's execution. I think the game would be perfect if part 2's execution was better. And as I said, my idea of giving plot points in the first part, I definitely think the game would, the story would have flowed a lot better. So, you know, that's how I feel about the game. But Tales of Arise, still my game of the year. Probably not going to be beaten by SMT5. SMT5 could be my 2nd favorite game. I think SMT5 will probably be good. I'm not saying it won't be good. I have to play the game to know, but it's going to take a lot to beat Tales of Arise. I know I've ranted about the second half, and it's gonna feel like, you know, I hated the game, but no, the second half didn't ruin the game for me. It lowered my opinion of the game, and it made me think, like, what it could have been. I just think if the game had more development time and more time with the plot, they could have done better with it. It does not ruin the game, by any means. The game is still near perfect. This is just one of its shortcomings. Again, they should have done it like Berseria, give us more villain stuff, or just develop the lords, or just not rush everything down our throat in the second half. But yeah, I'm gonna actually do a quick outro for this part. I'm gonna end the video here, and then we'll dive into the post game. We're not done with stream, but we'll do that. So, those of you watching on YouTube, this is the end of the main story. We'll be back with the post game immediately after. I'm just gonna end it here so I have an easier time editing. But yeah, so this will be the end of the main story. Again, story is good. They could have done better with part 2. But other than that, the characters were great, skits were great, gameplay was great, music was great. Everything was phenomenal in this game, other than the second half, which makes the ending seem fine or good. But yeah. Anyway, so I hope you guys catch the post game. That'll be going up immediately after this. I just want to end this to make it easier to splice. But yeah, thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time.